Hello, I'm Benji Febre, Director of Photography and Head of Costuming and Rendering for the Taoist foodie short film posted in March 2020 and submitted as part of a master's group project to Bournemouth University. On behalf of the team, welcome to this brief commentary and a tremendous thank you to all of the supporting lecturers, staff and faculty at Bournemouth University, as well as to the friends and family whose support made this piece possible. The Taoist is the brainchild of Belinda Huang, based loosely on Chinese mythology and style interpreted on an intersection of Western and Eastern influences. I originally requested to join the group for the costumes, but my role ultimately extended into camera layout and cinematography, lighting and rendering, and a pseudo-pipeline tech and developer role. Certainly my proudest achievement in the project was the costumes though. The original design was sketched out by Belinda, and she helped research the patterns and construction methods historically used by similar robes in China. These are by no means historically accurate representations, but they are heavily inspired by several eras in Chinese history. The lighting and cinematography, however, were largely influenced by Western cinema, particularly by westerns and crime dramas of the mid-20th century. The wide aspect ratio and camera work are loosely influenced by Tonino Dellicoli's work in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, while the sinister top lighting was inspired by Gordon Willis's work in The Godfather. It was this blending of Western and Eastern styles that we were trying to mirror in the story about a Taoist making a Western cupcake. As is to be expected with such projects, the original storyboard is significantly different from the final product. I animated a proxy character and used rough AFIS made by myself or the team to start adapting versions of the storyboard that were passed to me. In some cases, when we started hitting roadblocks and ways of adapting the story to fit a shorter production time, I started concepting completely different versions of the story. My personal favorite focused solely on the final shot where the Taoist is sitting at the table and admiring the cake. The piece opens on a close-up of the Taoist's eyes, reminiscent of old spaghetti westerns of the cowboy facing off a villain in a standoff. While it was ultimately decided against because it lost the magical elements of baking the cake, it can still be felt in elements of the cinematography of the final piece. Once we finalized the story, various explorations of shot, composition, and duration were explored before the final version you see was settled on. One of the core elements of the story that we wanted to explore in the Taoist was the notion of unexpected duality, that people may or may not hold to the stereotypes you might expect them to. The old, wise Taoist, who would be expected to be grumpy and sinister, turns out to be a baker that is making a sweet cake. To push the subversion further, we really wanted to go from one extreme to the other in terms of lighting. Original lighting inspiration came from The Godfather, with its strong top lighting that left the titular Don's eyes obscured in shadow, and thus obscuring his public nature and intent. This would then be contrasted to the softer natural lighting of the cake reveal sequence, mirroring the more optimistic Sicily sequences of The Godfather. The first half of the Taoist also did not include global illumination, adding to the darker feel. Once the sun rises and the cake is revealed, global illumination is faded in, brightening the entire scene with it. Further lighting inspiration came from various contemporary Chinese animations that use similar dramatic theatrical lighting, using swaths of blues and reds to give a cold, sinister feel to the image. Initial lighting tests tried to imitate this lighting style while keeping a semblance of realism to it, such as via global illumination, but in a bid to reduce render times and add to the contrast in lighting between the first and the second half of the piece, the lighting was ultimately pushed in a more stylized theatrical direction as seen in the final production. The costume for the Taoist was originally designed by Belinda, inspired and adapted from traditional Chinese garments. Her concept was researched and adapted into final form that you see. The costumes were constructed in Marvelous Designer, and the base fabric materials were textured in Substance Painter, based off of traditional Chinese clothing patterns of the types of garments portrayed. In order to achieve a pseudo-sense of realism in the behavior of the fabric, every level of the costume was modeled and simulated in Marvelous Designer, from the trousers and the inner shirt to the outer cloak. The adornments on the lapels and cuffs are symbols and text significant to Taoist culture and were also textured by Belinda. Various simulation tests were completed to see how well the costume could hold up in varying situations, from flying to walking and landing. One recurring issue was the tendency for the underlying animation to move faster than humanly possible, so the simulation wouldn't be able to keep track of the clothes as the body moved underneath them, resulting in the character completely jumping out of the fabric. This was addressed by retiming the animation in some cases, or increasing the time substepping of the animation and dampening the motion of the fabric so it didn't jump and fly out in unusual ways to keep up with the exaggerated motions of the character. Due to limitations of time and software, the clothes were all single planes of fabric with no thickness and minimal detailing, particularly in the seams where you would expect to at least see some needlework. In future projects, I will certainly be looking at pushing the level of detail further in the fabric and tertiary detailing.